Wicked. So, here we go. Right, let's do it. Injury prevention in female athletes. Hello guys. So, just a quick intro on me. My name's Brogan. I am a specialist musculoskeletal physiotherapist. Run a private practice in North Manchester. We've got two clinics, gym-based. So, a lot of our work is working with weekend warrior athletes, football players, CrossFitters, so heavy sports background. I've got a special interest in sport, and return to sport. So just what kind of today's around. So we want to obviously talk about why injury prevention matters. So mistraining competition can derail development, your own development, but also team success. So the aim is to help educate you, reduce the risk of injury, and ultimately improve performance. Um, so we're going to start with current injury prevention strategies. So does anybody have any current strategies for injury prevention? So how do we prevent injuries at the moment? I've put a few photos on there. I've put the magic sponge on there, obviously. When I was younger, if you had an injury, it was a cold sponge, dab it on, and away you went. I remember in school we had the wet paper towel. Just put a wet paper towel on it, it'd be fine. I don't think those strategies quite cut the mustard, but hey ho. So other pictures that I've put on there, obviously we've got foam rolling, we've got stretching, yoga, Pilates, weights, sleep, massively important. There's a picture of food on there, so diet, nutrition. And I won't talk too much on that because I know you've got to talk with a nutritionist a little bit later on. Supplements, I obviously have creatines on there, but it means supplements in general. So there's a lot of things out there that we can use, and some people are probably already using to help prevent injuries at the moment. So what does futsal demand from your body? So the research shows that women's futsal is one of the most physically demanding sports. During matches, your heart rate stays at around 85 to 90% of its maximum, which means you're working really hard almost the entire game. So you're constantly sprinting, stopping, turning, landing. This requires both strong aerobic fitness for recovery, and anaerobic for power and your explosive actions. So the demand is why injury prevention training is so important because your body needs to be strong enough to handle it. So common injuries that we see in women's futsal. So most injuries in futsal happen in the lower limb. So about 70 to 80%. Majority are non-contact. So that means it's not always someone else's tackle causing the issue. Often it's how we land, move, cut. So if we break it down, knee injuries like ACL, MCL, meniscal tears, um, are particularly important in female athletes. So the research shows that women are more at risk than men for ACL injuries. And there's a few reasons for that. So biomechanics, so women often land and cut with their knees caving in, which is called a knee valgus, which puts more stress on the ACL. Hormones, fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone during the menstrual cycle can affect your ligament laxity. And we'll talk about the menstrual cycle a little bit later on. Strength balance, so hamstrings, which protect the ACL, are often weaker compared to the quadriceps in female athletes, which increases that vulnerability of the ACL and of that knee. Ankle sprains, so they're common because futsal involves so much cutting, turning, quick contact, change direction, and obviously hamstring groin strains. So these usually happen in high speed actions like cutting, deceleration, and then we'll see our overuse injuries. So things like your patellar tendinopathy, medial tibial stress syndrome, which is shin splints essentially, Achilles issues from the high training load and that repetitive stress. So the key takeaway, is that most of these injuries are preventable if we build strength, improve our landing and our cutting technique, and manage our training and recovery properly. So, why female athletes are at higher risk? So biomechanics. Women generally have a wider pelvis, which changes the angle of the knee, which is called the Q angle. So combine that with that dynamic knee valgus, that's why the knee where the knee drops in on landing and cutting, and that increases the strain on the ACL and the MCL. We've got hormonal influences. So female hormones fluctuate across the menstrual cycle. So estrogen, for example, can increase ligament laxity, which means the knee joint feels less stable at certain times throughout that cycle. Neuromuscular control. So female athletes often show less hamstring activation compared with the quadriceps, like we've just said. And obviously the hamstrings are helping to protect that ACL by resisting the forward movement of the shin. This imbalance makes the knee more vulnerable at the high speed actions. Training load. So many female futsal players balance club, international, and external commitments like university or work. So when the load isn't managed well, fatigue is going to build up, and that might increase our injury risk. So I know a lot of you here do play at other clubs as well. As other commitments. So you're doing a lot of training hours throughout the week, and a lot of game time as well throughout the week. And then we've got our psychosocial factors. So stress, lack of sleep, poor recovery habits also play a role. So fatigue doesn't just affect how you feel, it changes how your body moves, and technique obviously breaks down when you're tired. Um, so again, people holding down full-time jobs, studying, as well as playing at such a high level. So it's not just one factor, it's a mixture, physical, hormonal, training, lifestyle influences. But the positive news is that almost all of these things can be managed through smart training, good recovery, and proper preparation. There's a PPP in there somewhere. Okay, so I just want to touch on REDS, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. Now, this was used to be a topic just kind of mainly focused on females. We know that it does affect men and women, males and female. Um, but obviously I'm going to talk a little bit on like your female athlete triad, so bone density and menstrual disorders. So what is REDS? So it happens when the amount of energy you take in through your food doesn't match up with the energy that you're using. So not just through your training, but your day-to-day life as well. So it's important to know, it's not just about body weight or body image, and it's not only about periods, it affects the whole body. So hormones, bone health, mood, recovery, concentration, all these things can be impacted. So if we're looking at the diagram, we've got gastrointestinal disorders, depression and eating disorders, endocrine disorders, metabolic, anemia. Um, for us in particular, looking at that female athlete triad, reduced bone density, menstrual disorders, and obviously the link with that low energy availability. So when athletes don't fuel properly, we see some clear risks. So we've got more injuries like stress fractures, muscle tears, because we've got that reduced bone density. Fatigue, poor recovery, meaning that you're constantly feeling tired. So if you've got other things going on, like school, college, work, that's going to be massively affected. And almost most importantly for you guys as players, reduce performance. So you just can't sprint, recover, or play at your best if your body is not fueled properly. So REDS is both a health issue and a performance issue. So think of food as fuel. So if you don't give your body enough, it can't do what you're asking of it. And the demand of the sport of futsal is massive. Coming on to the menstrual cycle. So the menstrual cycle is split into four phases, and each can influence how your body feels and performs. So if we start with the menstrual phase, this is where your periods start. Your hormones are at their lowest, and some players feel more tired or will get cramps. Then we move into the follicular phase, gets me every time that. Estrogen begins to rise, which often means our energy levels improve and you might feel stronger in your training. Then we move on to your ovulation. So this is the midpoint. So this is where estrogen peaks. Research suggests that ligament laxity is higher in your ovulation phase, which can increase the risk of knee injuries like ACL. And then we move on to your luteal phase. So progesterone is higher, your body temperature goes up slightly, and some players notice more fatigue towards the end of the cycle, so in this phase. So understanding these phases don't mean that you stop training during certain phases or playing at certain times. It's just about being aware of where you are. So if we know when fatigue, recovery demands, or joint laxity are higher, we can adapt how we prep, we can adapt how we train. And just as important, if periods are irregular or stop altogether, that's a red flag. It's a red flag for low energy availability or reds like we just talked about. So tracking your cell cycle helps. And it helps us kind of obviously knowing where we're at, but knowing if that cycle is healthy, which is going to help you perform at your best. There's a few apps that you can use to help track your cycle. So I'll pop them in an email. There's a few bits after, so I'll pop them in an email over to everyone at the end. So breaking down the main reasons futsal has such a high risk for lower limb injuries. So it's a balancing act and we can't predict everything on the court, but we can understand the risks and prepare bodies accordingly. So obviously we've got a high frequency of acceleration and deceleration. So elite football players perform around 423 accelerations, so speeding up, and 430 decelerations, so slowing down, per match, which is about 7 to 8 per minute. So that's constant speeding up, slowing down, planting, changing direction. These transitions are hugely demanding on joints, muscles, and especially under fatigue. Obviously, futsal is played on a court, um, which is very unforgiving. So every cut, jump, pivot is absorbed by the joints, the soft tissues with little give, so it's increasing stress on those joints, ankles, knees, lower back. We've got frequent contact and sharp movements. So with the futsal court being small, we're in tight spaces, players are going to collide, tackle, pivot, lunge with half a step of each other. So that contact combined with the abrupt direction changes stresses the body in ways that training alone, we must prepare you for that. And we've got short, intense bursts and less recovery in between. So unlike football, with rest periods, futsal involves non-stop action, repeated sprints, shifts, maneuvers, with almost no opportunity to recover. So when fatigue sets in, technique is going to reduce and the injury risk will go up. High volume of pivots, turns, lunges. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but it's because it happens a lot. So the typical futsal game demands rapid cuts, multi-directional movements. So it's fun, it's exciting, but the high risk for knee and ankle injuries, if your strength and control aren't up to the task. And then we've got the cumulative fatigue from frequent intense match play. So because games are short but intense, fatigue will accumulate over time. So without proper recovery, the thresholds for injury are lower, and injuries start to happen during routine movements. So the bottom line is that we can't control the unpredictability of a futsal game, but we can prepare for it. So that means building resilience through strength, movement control, smart recovery, and through rehabilitation after injury, and making sure that we're kind of taking you right up through to end stage and even better. So touching on the four pillars of injury prevention. So how do we actually reduce the injury risk and keep you performing at your best? So if we start with strength and conditioning, Obviously, we need strong glutes, hamstrings, quads, calves to control knee, ankle during all those sprints, cuts, landings. We need good core and trunk stability, because if your trunk wobbles and you can't control that deceleration, it'll change the forces then going down through the leg. Neuromuscular training. So this is about the control, things like balance, single leg stability, correct landing mechanics. It also includes change direction drills so that when you cut and you pivot in a match, your body is prepped for it, but it's prepped in a safe environment before we get you back onto the field, court. Load management. So a lot of injuries happen when the training match load is too high or recovery is too low. So monitoring how much futsal you're doing alongside other commitments is vital. Obviously looking at your recovery strategies, so sleep, good nutrition, hydration, what allow your body to adapt and get stronger rather than break down. Prep and recovery. So every session and game should start with a proper dynamic warm-up. So mentioned the FIFA 11, there's been loads of research done on that, but adapted for futsal to get the muscles activated and muscles ready. And then after cooling down, and what does your recovery look like? Do you stretch off, or do you not spend as much time of your mobility and your stretching, which is going to help speed up recovery and reduce the soreness. So the key message is that none of these work in isolation, but it's the combination of good strength, control, load management, and prep that will build the resilience and keep you injury free again whilst improving your performance. So recovery and lifestyle. So injury prevention isn't just about what you do on the court or what you do in the gym. It's about how you look after your body off the court. Um, so if we talk about sleep, there's been a lot of research done on sleep and the duration of sleep and how that impacts your injury and your injury risk. So we want to aim for at least 8 hours a night because sleep is when your body repairs and the muscle tissue. Um, and if you cut your sleep short, you're not giving yourself the chance to recover properly, and the risk of your injury goes up. So when they did a lot of research on length of times asleep, and they compared 5, 6, 7, 8, and the jump from 6 hours of sleep to 8 hours, the injury risk is massive. I think it's like 30%. You're at 30% more risk of injury. So I'll find that study and I'll put it in the email when I send bits out on your tracking your menstrual cycle and other bits. Um, Nutrition, so thinking of food as fuel. So obviously we've got protein, which helps rebuild, carbs, replacing those energy stores, and hydration, keeping everything function. Skipping meals or not drinking enough water means your body doesn't have what it needs to perform or to recover. Obviously we've talked a lot on menstrual cycle awareness. So for female athletes, your cycle is a key marker of health. Some phases may bring more fatigue or increased ligament laxity, but being aware of this and adjusting your training or recovery when needed will make a big difference. Um, Tracking your cycle, super, super important. Stress management, like we said, many of you juggle futsal with studies, work, other commitments, children. So high stress without recovery affects your body too. So finding balance through good time management, rest days, and recovery strategies is super important. So these are the foundations. You can do all the strength and conditioning in the world, but if you're not sleeping, you're not fueling, and you're not recovering well, your body won't cope with the demands of a futsal game. So, key takeaways. Injury prevention and performance is a balancing act. So we can't control everything, especially in sport like futsal, where there's contact, high speed, unpredictability. Some injuries just happen, but there are a lot of things that we can control, and those are the areas that will make the biggest difference over time. So we can control how we train, so making sure we're building up strength, working on movement quality, and we're not skipping warm-ups, cool downs. We can control how we fuel our bodies, so eat enough carbs, protein, staying hydrated. We can control our recovery, so getting good quality sleep, listening to our bodies when they're tired and sore, just touching on sleep, like I've said about tracking your cycles, tracking your sleep as well. A lot of us now wear Apple Watches, Garmin, Fitbits, Whoop. Let's be tracking. But if we have got a low sleep score, then doing something about it. So reaching out, speaking to someone, and looking at taking a step back and why is that sleep score low? Are we not winding down? Have we not got a routine? So having the data, but then doing something about it. And we can control how we look after ourselves day to day. So managing stress, balancing studies or work with training, speaking up early if something doesn't feel right. So if you focus on the controllables, you give yourself your best chance to perform at your best, and reduce the risk of injury. So the kind of message that I want to leave you with, is control the controllables because that's where your power lies as athletes. So injury prevention isn't just about staying off the treatment table, it's about improving performance. So if you can stay healthy, you'll recover better, perform at a higher level, and get more minutes on the court. That means more consistency in training, more opportunities to develop, and essentially more game time. And for us as a squad, obviously fewer injuries mean a stronger team, more options for the coaches, a better chance of winning games and representing your country at the highest level. So remember, injury prevention equals better performance, more time on the court, more wins for England Futsal. So any questions? I know that's a massive topic. It's a massive topic to kind of try and squeeze into half an hour. But I'll put the apps in an email and I'll send that out to everybody. But so yeah, any questions?